All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. The clock is ticking for the Las Vegas Raiders to make a decision on Derek Carr, who was once their franchise quarterback. There was a Wednesday deadline for the Raiders to either trade Carr, release him, or bring him back due to language in his contract that will guarantee his salary of nearly $40 million for next season. The Raiders finally gave Carr permission to speak to other teams, which did result in a Pro Bowl quarterback visiting the New Orleans Saints. However, with Carr refusing to take a pay cut, any chances of the Saints trading for him went out of the window. Carr is also refusing to trade to refute his no trade clause, which means that the Raiders are going to have no choice but to release him. Carr, and I've said this before, he has all of the leverage here. And at the end of the day, he simply called the Raiders bluff. Now, this right here, in my opinion, falls into the laps, plural, of Raiders team owner Mark Davis, as well as head coach Josh McDaniels. Now, I know that McDaniels, is the latest in a long string of head coaches that Derek Carr has played for the National Football League. But given McDaniels' previous track record as far as what he did when he was the head coach of the Denver Broncos, he is one of those where he is known for trying to put his fingerprints, if you will, on an organization, especially the offense. And in the process, he can ruin things because I've talked about this before and I will talk about it again. Derek Carr in 2021 completed nearly 68.5% of his passes. And if you go back to his three previous years under John Gruden and the former Raiders head coach, Carr completed more than 70% of his passes in 2019, more than 67% of his passes in 2020, and then 68 or nearly 68.5% of his passes in 2021 as compared to just 60.8 in the year 2022. And of course, for Mark Davis in this Raiders front office, you put this language in Carr's contract. You gave him leverage, and then by showing Carr up, theoretically, whether regardless how you feel as far as Derek Carr's ability as a quarterback in the NFL, he was still the Raiders franchise quarterback. And they basically showed him up, and it was a slap in his face because I mean, this guy, he's been this franchise going back to its days in Oakland. And again, you bench him, for a scenario where you still had an opportunity to win and possibly get to the playoffs. They were still mathematically alive, but obviously, Jared Stidham is not the future at quarterback for the Raiders, regardless of any way that Josh McDaniels wants to spin it. So Derek Carr is like, you know what? I got this clause in my contract. I'm not going to make it easy for you if you're the Raiders. I'm not going to go out there and make any concessions. I'm not going to go out there and take a pay cut. Carr can now have the opportunity to work the open market. And I said this from the outset when this scenario began to come to the surface towards the end of the regular season that the Raiders are going to regret this. They rolled the dice on it, and Derek Carr knows, guess what? The ball is in my court and it's my time for me to play. So if you're a team that wants Derek Carr, and I think somebody will sign him next year to be their starting quarterback, why would anybody want to give up draft capital and you still got to go out there and pay him when you could just wait for the Raiders to release him because they have no choice now? 72 hours within the end of the Super Bowl, they got to go out there and do this. So Derek Carr is going to be in the open market in a couple of days. And for his standpoint and his agent standpoint, they have a leg up on this because they're going to have a month's head start ahead of the other quarterbacks around the NFL that are looking for a trade, a release, or just trying to find a new team as a free agent due to the fact that the new league year doesn't begin to March. And now Carr will still have the opportunity to go out there and speak to teams and visit teams due to the fact that he will now be a free agent. At the end of the day, this is another black eye for Mark Davis. and the Raiders. You think about how they looked last year in the face of adversity, getting to the playoffs, very close to beating the Cincinnati Bengals in the wild card round. And you expected the Raiders to build off of that. Mark Davis, in my opinion, destroyed that when he did not want to bring Rich Bisaccia back. He wanted to go for sizzle as opposed to substance when he brought in Josh McDaniels. The players again rallied around Rich Bisaccia. Derek Carr was one of those players as well. And you just think about how close the Raiders were to turning the corner, and it looks like they're going to be right back to square one because Carr's not going to be there, and they got to figure out if you're the Raiders, are you going to go the veteran quarterback route, or are you just going to just tear this thing up, go for a rookie quarterback, and start over? We have to wait and see. But you look for Carr from his standpoint, there are options out there. First and foremost, I think one thing that there are going to be some teams looking at, in my opinion, they want to see the availability of the likes of Aaron Rodgers and Lamar Jackson. Are the Ravens really going to really consider possibly trading Lamar Jackson as opposed to franchising him? We have to wait and see. And I'm not going to sit up here and say that the Ravens are going to do it. It's a possibility, not a guarantee. Lamar could be back with Baltimore next year. He could be back with Baltimore for the next 10 years. We don't know, but we have to wait and see. Stronger possibility that the Packers move on from Aaron Rodgers, but it's one of those scenarios where teams might have to get in a bidding war because Green Bay is going to look for picks because this is a small market team. They really don't historically pay guys unless it's their quarterback. So you definitely want to try to start over if you're Green Bay and get all the draft capital that you could possibly get. Derek Carr could be a cheaper option for a team depending on what they're looking for. I think the New York Jets are going to be in the mix to try to get the services of Aaron Rodgers, but Derek Carr could potentially be a fallback option for them. Not saying it is a guarantee, possibility. I mentioned the Baltimore Ravens just in case they decide to move on from Lamar Jackson. We have to wait and see. The New Orleans Saints, I still think that they're going to be in the mix. Now, the Saints didn't want to pay Carr at his current salary, and they also had to give up the draft capital, excuse me, but it's still a scenario where the Saints could go back and say, you know what, fine, we can pay you a fraction now of what you were going to be paid before due to the fact that the cap hit for the Raiders as far as them releasing you, but nonetheless, he could still be in fold to be New Orleans starting quarterback next season. We got to wait and see. Another team in the mix, and this is basically has an NFC South vibe to it. The Carolina Panthers. You have a new head coach in Frank Reich, and if you go back to Frank Reich's time in Indianapolis, he had a thing for bringing in veteran quarterbacks following the retirement of Andrew Luck. You had Philip Rivers, who they got to the playoffs with. You had Carson Wentz for a year, and then you had Matt Ryan. Of course, with the last two, it really didn't work out. Could it possibly work out for Derek Carr if he went to Carolina? We got to wait and see. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, are they going to start over completely, or are they going to say, you know what? Let's get a veteran quarterback in here. Obviously, Derek Carr is not Tom Brady, but it's a scenario where he still could possibly keep this thing afloat and keep Tampa in contention to win that division. Also, the Washington Commanders. You have a scenario where Washington was on the cusp of being a playoff team this past season. More than likely, they're going to move on from Tyler Heineke. And it's one of those scenarios where Jack Del Rio, the current defensive coordinator for the Commanders, was the head coach of the Raiders when Derek Carr was drafted in the second round. He's always had an affinity for him. And if you're Ron Rivera, Washington's head coach, you feel like if your team is on the cusp of getting to the playoffs, maybe, just maybe, the right quarterback could help you get over that hump. And then finally, the San Francisco 49ers. And I'm throwing this out there because we don't know the extent to the Brock Purdy injury. Is Brock Purdy going to be your starting quarterback next year? Are you going to go with Trey Lance? One thing we know for sure, I don't see Jimmy G coming back to the Bay Area and playing for the Niners. Nonetheless, could Derek Carr be an option right there? You look at it, Derek Carr knows about playing in the Bay Area. He played with the Raiders when they were still in Oakland, and hands down, this would be the best team that Derek Carr has ever played for because you look at it, The Niners are stacked, and obviously, we saw what they were lacking in that NFC Championship game loss to Philadelphia. They needed a quarterback. Not saying that San Fran would have won that game with Brock Purdy, but their chances probably would have been a little bit better as opposed to them having to go with Josh Johnson. And then, of course, Josh Johnson got hurt. But nonetheless, I think the NFC South could intrigue Derek Carr. And this is just me speaking from an outsider's perspective. I say that from the standpoint that you look at it, the Bucks won this division last year with a record of 8-9. Everybody else in that division was 7-10, so you're not that far off. The Saints, they're still solid on D. They had their issues at quarterback. Carolina came on strong last year under Steve Wilkes. They have some talent. They can run the football. They have talent at receiver, and they have talent on the defensive side of the ball. Maybe Derek Carr is the guy at quarterback to get them over the hump and win the NFC South. We don't know. And then, of course, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So you look at it, Derek Carr will soon have a new NFL head home. And I think, again, he's going to have the opportunity to get out there and talk to these teams in a fashion that the other quarterbacks are not, due to the fact that they cannot do it until the new league year starts. So the Raiders put themselves in this situation. You can't feel sorry for them. Like I've said before, the ball is in Derek Carr's court, and he's going to take it and run with it and do what's best for him. So, folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take this time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you have not already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it'll be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. Now you can check it out, drop a line, and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin. I'm signing off, saying take care and have yourselves a wonderful day.